Walters and have him have the opening prayer for our show. Thank you, Father.
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and the beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and the artistry that you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Father Ron, thank you so very much. We really appreciate your participation and your help with the shows. Let me talk briefly about the scholarship program. It looks like it's going very well to me. We've had people download the applications. It's probably still a little early to get a lot of applicants actually submitting them. We've had 2 so far submit applications. And so I'm encouraged the way that the program is being put together by the committee. I'm excited that Jeff Jordan was able to get the 501c3 in what I consider just record time through the federal government. We still have one more piece of paper we have to get, but that's from the state of Florida. And I talked to the state of Florida early or late last week, and Jeff told me what to say and who to talk to. So we had to send them a second copy of our request to be able to solicit funds. But I got a feedback and an email back from them this time that said, yes, they received it. Yes, it has been assigned to somebody. Yes, we will hear. So that piece of paper, I think, will be forthcoming. And that'll be the last approval then from any governmental organization that we need. So shortly, the committee is going to have another meeting, I think, in 2 weeks. And shortly, we'll be able to come up and tell you about our 2024 program. I think you'll be excited to hear about it and what our plans are, how we plan to raise money, who the people are that we're going to be going after, and the kind of help that we need, and making sure that we can raise as much money as we possibly can. How many scholarships we're going to offer depends on how much money we can raise. How much money we're going to raise depends on how much contributions we can get. As far as I'm concerned, I think the demand is out there from the people that are saying things to me, at least. I'm convinced that the model railroad community will support our activities, that they agree with us that the scholarship is a good idea. And it's up to us now to take the ball and carry it a little bit further. And I'm comfortable that the committee that we have and what they're working on is going to get us further than we ever thought possible. So I couldn't be more pleased about the direction that this program is going and the help that we're getting from a lot of people that frankly we haven't even asked for help from before. So that's the scholarship. AP credit, Achievement Program Credit by the NMRA. I sent a letter to Frank Koch, who is the national chairman of the NMRA Achievement Program, telling Frank that I want to be able to offer AP credit for modelers that come on the show and do presentations, either the build-alongs or watch me builds or whatever kind of presentations they make. I think it's worthy of getting credit for them, to give them credit for what they do on our show, because I think they're making significant contributions to modeling in our hobby. And I think that's what the NMRA Achievement Program is all about. I haven't heard back from Frank yet. I hope to this week. And then I'll let you know exactly what it's going to take. And if you want to have that documentation, then all you'd have to do is just let me know, and I'll make sure that I've signed it and you have it. I do want to thank Martin Brechbiel, MMR, again, for the help that he's giving our show by posting our activities in his magazine, O Scale Trains. I really do appreciate it. Just Martin, thank you so much for all the help that you've been to us. I have something about the Association of Professional Model Makers Convention that I want to read to you. At the Association of Professional Model Makers annual convention held in Dayton, Ohio over the weekend of March 3 through 6. Approximately 70 professional model makers from all across the country and a few from around the world met to exchange ideas, share key learning experiences, and visit local model shops. This year's successful event is a major component of the education and professional advancement activities that the APMM has. To learn more about the Association of Professional Model Makers, their website is www.modelmakers.org, modelmakers.org. And I encourage you to look at it. I'm really impressed with that organization. I personally have learned a lot from the different people that I have met there, and from a different perspective, because the equipment, the kind of programs that they put on with manufacturers is just totally different than anything that I personally have been exposed to before. And learning about what's coming in technology and what 3D printing down the road is going to look like has really been eye-opening for me. So I would encourage you to take a look if you're interested in that kind of thing and expanding your knowledge of the technology of the future. We were asked by the NMRA to help them put on a clinic at their national convention in Dallas, Texas, August the 21st through the 26th. And we've made arrangements to have that done. So this will be a new tracks clinic. It'll be based on our build along. It'll run over 3 days, approximately an hour a day. We have a manufacturer who has agreed to provide the kits at a discount. And we have a extremely talented modeler who's agreed to do the clinics for us. And for that, I really am pleased. So the fact that New Tracks will get some credit, the fact that the NMRA wants our participation, offering a clinic at the national convention, I think it speaks well for New Tracks and the direction that we're in. And I really appreciate them wanting to include New Tracks in their national convention. Modeling Lifestyle, the next show coming up that we have is on the 16th of March with Jim DeBoer. And we have a short video we'd like to show you now about Jim DeBoer.
Join the Modeling Lifestyle at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on March 16th, where we will feature the modeling lifestyle of Jim DeBoer. Jim, from Orange City, Iowa, carves amazing tractor models and is only 93. Join Jim DeBoer, his son Jeff, host Jim Kello and friends for an interesting discussion about modeling on the plains.
I love the sound of a whistle.
If you get a chance, I really hope that you'll be able to watch that interview. He is one fantastic gentleman. He really is. The first time that I talked to him, I just couldn't believe the kind of models that he creates and how he does it. And just listening to him talk about his modeling is a real education. So I hope that you'll be able to tune in. And if you've ever wondered about the farming community and how to model a farming community on your model railroad, Jim is the person that you really need to talk to, because some of his models, they will just blow your mind. They are just unbelievable, and they're fully functional. I mean, if it's supposed to move an arm out from a position, the arms move. I mean, it's really something to see what he created for the farm equipment that he builds. The build-alongs coming up, we have 3 of them that we want to talk about. Inkscape is a program that you can use, and Father Ron is going to show you how to do it and how to create some CAD programs using Inkscape. And I really appreciate Father Ron agreeing to do that. Touch Toggle. And by the way, Father Ron is going to be doing it March the 29th. April the 19th, Touch Toggle is going to be on the show demonstrating their products. And then Tom York on May the 10th is going to start building his model. Tom's model, he's only making 25 of them, and it's an O-scale model, and it's $40 total cost delivered to your front door. And it doesn't get much better than that, particularly since Tom is coming out of retirement and designed this model and produced 25 of them for our show. So I really appreciate his going to this trouble and supporting us as much as he has. The next My Bill is March the 15th, and I will turn that over to Mr. Chris Corse, who is the host for the My Bills.
Thanks, Jim. Let's see here. We shall start out with our promo for the week. All right, next week, March 15th, we are doing the My Build featuring you. So please send us your photos. Drop them in an email to railrunner130@hotmail.com. And we're going to change things up a little bit with April. We are going to we're actually going to have a theme in April. On April 26th, it'll be a spring theme, shows your vegetation, your scenery, that sort of thing. So send us what you've got, and we'll go ahead and put those in. Just make sure that you put in there that it's for April, although it'll probably be pretty obvious. So anyway, please drop us an email, especially if you haven't contributed before. We really want to encourage the people that haven't done anything before to please show us what you're working on, because we're all working on something. So anyway, I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
It may be interesting for you to realize something too. I publish everybody and all their models that they show on the My Bills in my next article, whichever magazine that happens to be. The last one that we published had almost 200 views just of that segment that Chris does on the My Bill on the last time we did it. And for the My Bill specific segment to get that many views shows the interest of modelers in what you're doing and how you're doing it, and listening to you talk about your models. So that ought to encourage you all to want to participate in this, because obviously you are making a difference to some of the people that are watching and viewing the videos later. And for that, I thank you so very much, because when Chris and I first came up with this idea, gosh, years ago now, I hate to say that, Chris, but it seems like forever.
3, 4.
Yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing that we were hoping for. We didn't know how to get there. We didn't know what to say. We didn't know how to encourage people to even participate. We didn't know whether you'd want to do it or not. But I think it's coming around to what we originally hoped it would be. And for that, I thank everybody, and hope that people that have never tried it before will give it a try. It's a fun thing to do. It's non-judgmental. And I can't encourage you any more than that. So with that said, Hank Primus is not able to be with us tonight because he's tied up in trying to put on his train show, and he's head over heels involved with that right now. So I want to introduce Phil Edholm, who is filling in for Hank and giving a quick tip for this evening. Phil, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. So I'm going to continue this evening with this discussion about using PowerPoint as a modeling tool. So we started this last week. We're going to have about 10 weeks where we look at ways to use the tool set that's in PowerPoint to do modeling. Last week, we did the kind of an introduction, and I was hoping I get more feedback about, people found that interesting, went and tried it, were able to actually put some things on a piece of paper. This week, what I want to focus on is how do you make why and how do you make larger slides? And this is actually something for when you generate high resolution output like when you're going to go generate a photo and you're going to get printed at a Photoshop, they may have much higher resolution than your home printer. So when you look at PowerPoint, it was designed to do slides, but it actually turns out we can fake it a little bit and do some other things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you look on PowerPoint, when you open it, and you're looking at a slide, when you first open it, you'll be able to size the slide. So if you click on the upper left, you'll notice there's a tab called Design. So if you click on Design, that'll open up the tab that you see on the screen. And on the right, you'll notice there's a thing called Slide Size. And if you click on Slide Size, there's a drop-down menu that'll appear. At the bottom of that, it says Custom Slide Size. And that's really where we want to go. We want to go to Custom Slide Size. So slides normally are 16 by 9, 4 by 3. If you click on Custom, though, you all of a sudden get this little interesting drop-down window. And it lets you pick the size slides you want. You can see the width and the height there on the screen, numbering the slides from, and you can decide whether you want portrait or landscape. So depending on what you're printing, you may want things printed in portrait versus landscape, depending on how you want to lay things out. So we now click on that, and what we want to do is we want to use that to go from widescreen to custom. So if you notice here, we click on that, that's widescreen. We want to click on custom, and that'll open custom. And when you do custom, you can now choose the size of the slide you're going to produce. And the reason we're going to do this is that the bigger the slide, the higher the resolution of the final image we produce. So if you notice here, the maximum you can do is 56 by 56 inches. So the way to think about this is don't think about it as a slide, think about it as a drawing sheet, right? So you've got an 8.5 by 11 size sheet. You know, for those of you who remember drafting, remember C size sheets, I remember you are D size sheets. So you can specify the size sheet you want depending upon the complexity of what you want to put on it and the resolution you want to get out. So basically, you know, here it shows 56 to 56. The reason this is important is large slides give you higher resolution. So it turns out PowerPoint is a 300 dot per inch in the slide package. So no matter how big the slide is or how small the slide is, it's 300 dots per inch. So when you load up the slide and you see those crossbars, typical 16 by 9 slide, you know, it's 8.5 inches high. It's wider across the sides. For every inch in that width, you get 300 dpi of resolution. So if you look at a slide that's 10 by 7.5, that's 3000 dpi by 2250 dpi. But if you go and take that same slide and make it 43 by 34, then it goes to it's actually 4x larger. So the point is that you're now going from 300 dpi, when you produce the image that you take to a printer, you send off to get printed, it's no longer 300 dpi because you started with a bigger slide. When you produce the image, it's 300 dpi per inch. So if you double the size of the slide from 10 inches to 20 inches, you're going to get 600 dpi instead of 300 dpi. And again, that's important when you're using a photographic, or you're going to someone who's using a really high-end laser printer to print decals. One of the questions to ask them is, what DPI is your process? Because that really is the resolution, how clearly you can see small text when you're printing that really tiny text, especially in HO. So what I want to show here was how we do basically a 6x4 photo image. So, you know, I actually yesterday did a bunch of 6x4 photos. They cost 45 cents for my local photo shop to print. And what I printed was labels to put on the modules for the show that I'm doing this weekend. Some that said, please do not touch, and some that identified little buildings. The way you do that is really simple. You need something less than 56 inches. Most printers are not more than 600 DPI, but if you do 1200 DPI, you're absolutely going to be safe. So if you take it to Kinko's, no matter where you take it, 1200 DPI is pretty much the maximum. 600 is pretty much what you'll see in a high resolution printer. The one at Mike's is a 600 DPI, but I go to 4 times just to be safe. So what that says is a 6x4 image becomes a 24 by 16 slide. So the image is 7,200 by 4,800 pixels. Now, what I do, and I'll show this, I'll show this in a second on a slide, is I actually, on the master slide, when I create these things, I put a grid of 1-inch wide blocks, and then another grid that's the alternate that's 1/2 inch wide. So when you put objects in, you can see how big they are. And I work in O scale, so one of the beauties of O scale is it's really easy to figure out size because you know a 1/2 inch is 8 feet, right? So, or excuse me, a 1/2 inch is 2 feet, an inch is 4 feet. So if you put something in, so if you look at that square that's there, that's 1 inch by 1 inch in actual print slides. Because again, we're actually printing this a lot smaller than we're looking at it on the screen. So if we want to do a decal image, an 8.5 by 11 decal image, again, if we want to go to 1200 DPI to be safe, we're multiplying it by 4. So that means our slide is 44 by 32 inches. So if you do a 44 by 32 inch slide, when you save that as a PNG or however you save it as a PDF, if you take it to Kinko's, they like PDFs. Tens, if you send it to photo print guys, they like PNGs. And I'll talk about that, about how to save stuff and print it later. But basically what you're going to do is when you save it, the image is a size based on the number of pixels it is. When you give it to them, you say, I want this printed in 6x4, it'll print out at 1200 DPI. I did put one little chart here together that's basically around resolution versus file size, because one of the things that people always say is, well, if you make a file bigger, it's going to be larger to store. So this shows you, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, you can look at it later, but basically what it shows at the top in the green is for 1200 DPI and 600 DPI, you know, for a print size of those size, what is the relative storage size for a .png image, a .jpeg, and a .pdf? And what you see is the green is the smallest for each one of those, and the orangish red is the largest. So what you see is that there's a bit of variance here. I mean, if you store at 300 DPI and you do a .png, it's only an 8K file. It's a fairly small file. These didn't have a lot of activity going on them. The more pictures and stuff you throw in, the bigger they get. On the other hand, the largest here I think we saw was in the neighborhood of 104K or some 109K, something like that. Actually, I guess it's 125. Actually, I'm wrong. It's 412. I missed that one. So there's some relatively large storage here if you store at 1200 DPI and JPEG, which is less efficient. Wanted to give you an idea. This is a 22 by 17 inch decal. So this was it's done in 22 by 17, so it prints an 8.5 by 11. So you just take this into Kinko's, give them the image. I typically do .png images. They're a little larger, but they tend to have better resolution and better cornering on them. And you take it to them, and it's about 2.4 megs for an image that's got these things on it in 22 by 17. So what I really wanted to do, just the last thing I want to do is just show you this for the lines, because I think that's actually an interesting. And I've got to open something here that I didn't have open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change my share here and share my second screen, which will look just the same for you. But what I want to do is put this one over here. So these are actually, I did these last night about 11 o'clock. I sent them to Mike's last night about 1 in the morning. And I got a notice from about an hour and a half ago that they're printed and I can pick them up. So these will print as 8.5 by 11 photos. So if you look at that, what you see up here, the red lines are on the master. So if you don't know how to do that, what you do is you click up here on view, you go to slide master, you got to go up to the top slide master here, and these lines are put on the slide master. And what that means is when you go look at them here, you can actually see them they're actually in the image, and you can use them to do your marking. When you go to print it, all you have to do is you just click on these and you go format background, and you can hide the background graphics. And now when you print it, it'll have a white background. So that's basically what I do when I go to print it. I use the background lines to position things, scale them, and size them. So if you look at these little images here are about 5 inches long. They're a little over an inch, about an inch tall. I'll just cut those out with a razor. I'll show you how to do this later. I cut them out with actually with a scalpel, run a black felt pen around to color them and make them look nice, and they'll just get stuck on the module and they'll look fine. These are actually labels for some of the structures to go on as well. But I just wanted you to see that. So basically, that's what we're going to talk about today. Next week, we will talk a bit about how to sketch in PowerPoint, how to use some of the tools, how to actually create random forms and shapes, so you can do different things. Any questions, comments? Too much detail, not enough detail?
Anybody do it differently?
Has anybody done that before? You varied the size of things to do resolution?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing that too.
Cool.
No, that's great. I never knew we could do that in PowerPoint. PowerPoint's a lot more easier to access than Illustrator.
Yeah, that's kind of the the thing from my perspective is that it's just everybody has it and it's pretty easy to use and you kind of know how. So, and like I said, the idea of being able to get the 600 or 1200 DPI images lets you take them anywhere and print them and get high resolution stuff out of them. So, anyway, enough said. That was
Phil?
it, Jim. I'll throw it. Yes.
Phil, when you say you're printing them out, are you printing them out on decal paper like micromark cells, or what kind of paper are you printing them out on?
I actually have a section on that in about 3 or 4 weeks. So the 4x6, the 4x6 images, I upload to Mike's, which is our local camera shop, and they print them on a 4x6 matte photo paper. So it's a thicker kind of photo paper. I find that's really nice if you cut it very well with a scalpel, and I have a set of felt pens of different colors, and I'll run a felt pen around the outside edge of the paper to color it. And when you color the edge to match the edge of the picture, it actually just goes away. You don't see it anymore. So those are 4x6 and they get printed that way. The decals, what I've typically been doing is buying them, essentially the paper from Micromark or no, there's the other guy. If I don't think about it, it'll come to me. It's a short name. It's 4 words. He's the guy who sells the LEDs. Evans Designs. They have very good paper, I believe. And so that's just 8.5 by 11. I just take it to my local, what was Kinko's, now it's FedEx office, I think. And they have fairly good high resolution laser printers and print them there. And they charge about $1. They charge about $1 to print out your stuff.
Phil,
So,
Phil, it's Pat here. Are you going to be doing anything to show us how to do a layout design on one of them?
I haven't done that. I can show you how I do it. I mean, we can do a session on that and I can show you what I do is what I did was I grabbed all the Fast Tracks templates when I need them and I scale them down and use those to do layout designs using PowerPoint. So like the things I showed when I showed on the build along, that layout design was actually all done in PowerPoint the same way. So I can go through and show that. I didn't really put it in. I kind of didn't know where to stop, but I can add something like that in as a separate thing if we'd like. You kind of leave it to everyone to talk about.
Thanks, Phil.
Cool. Thanks. Back to you, Jim.
When Phil and I talked about this, we're kind of hoping that you all can help, by asking your questions, it kind of helps Phil understand what he needs to cover. Because what we're finding in some of the presentations, I talked to Martin about it the other day. If Phil says, and I did this, Phil knows exactly in his mind what he's talking about, how he did it, what steps he took, and what he didn't do, right? I have no idea what he did. All I know is that he said he did something, but I have no idea how. And so what we're hoping is by your questions, Phil can figure out what he needs to include in a segment to try to make sure that you understand exactly what some of the terminology that he uses that makes sense to him, but may not make sense to the rest of us. So I appreciate the questions, and I know he does too.
Jim, this is Jeff. I got a suggestion. From having gone through all the computer training at my job, and they do something like this, and we find it very hard to retain just sitting in front of the screen of the demonstration. They usually send us away with a cheat sheet. Some sort of a cheat sheet on each of these lessons would be very helpful.
Phil, could we do that?
I was kind of hoping that's what the videos were online, were kind of that virtual
Yeah.
video cheat sheet. Yeah, it's interesting. The slides are all going to be there, so they will, kind of be there. The challenge is it's a lot of stuff to have to try to put into a cheat sheet. Try to figure out how to put it in there in a way that makes sense. I guess the other question.
Maybe we could have something on the first of the each one of the presentations to say exactly what it's going to cover,
Right.
so that people that go to the videos could easily pick up exactly what they want to see.
Well, so we're going to get later on, one of the things we can do is we can go through this, and if there's an interest, we can do something like, so one of the things I'm going to do in one of the later sessions, if you looked at it, is to go through how I find stuff on the internet. And by the way, Tom was doing some of that last week. There are a lot of us that are good at it, but this is for the folks who don't know how to go use Google, go find images, how you bring an image in, how you manipulate it, to, again, get it into something. So I want to make a sign that is a sign of a Coca-Cola sign from 1935. How do I go find that sign? How do I bring it in? How do I manipulate it? And how do I print it? We're going to go through that kind of those steps at some point in the future. If there's an interest, what we can do is everybody can go out and try to find their own sign. I can send out a template or put it up where it can be downloaded of a PowerPoint, the 4x6 slide. You can go out and find a slide, put it in there, play with it, and see how you do it. And then if you have a problem, we can talk about it online, how to solve the problem. I mean, if we want to make it more tutorial, I'm more than willing to do that. I'll leave it up to you guys. I find these tools make my life, like I said, if you look at what I threw up there at 11 o'clock last night, when I got home from my club meeting, I realized I had nothing to put on my module. It said, don't touch in that. And by 1 o'clock, they were printing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, enough said.
Okay, so moving along. Thank you, Phil. Let's go to, does someone have a question? I'm sorry. Okay, then let me move on to Martin Brechbiel, MMR. Martin is working on a maintenance of way car for us. Martin, welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Jim. Let's see if I can get my slides up. Well, let's try that. That looks right. And that looks right. Probably.
Yes,
Does it look right to everybody else?
Yes, it does.
Okay, it looks right to me. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, so we'll pick up where we left off, which was right here. I've got a toolbar sitting right in the wrong place on my screen. Well, there, that's better. Well, actually, it went away, even better. So there's where we left off last week. I'm sure everybody has a perfect screenshot memory of everything we did and how we got to here. And we're just going to keep going, except my slides aren't going forward now. Oh, there we go. I got it. So came up last week on how to cut things. Jim and Phil and etc. Others want to know how I managed to cut things using scalpels without leaving bloody fingerprints all over my bench top and on the floor, body parts, etc. Not to say that there aren't body parts on my floor. We're not going to talk about those. So we're moving right along. These are the scalpels currently on my bench right now. I actually have all those. So it's a different array. This is a number 23. It's in a number 4 handle. That's the larger, heavier handle. It's a larger scalpel. This is the one you see in movies probably because it's big and scary. The number 15, I just got a box of 100 of these. It's a tiny little thing, but this is actually the one I like to use when I'm taking apart things for laser cut parts, getting into really fine little tiny crevices, and you need to separate that little laser cut piece. You don't want to break it. The number 15 is what I like using. Number 10s, they look familiar to everybody. Number 11s, oh, these are also number 3 handles. These are a standard smaller handle. And here's a pair of 11s, and they're in barred Parker handles, which I happen to just lap. I enjoy using because they're very, very fine, more delicate. They let me do things that are where I need to be a little more delicate, a little more light in the touch. And I usually have a very new blade in both of those at any given moment. And so these are actually, you can buy these. They're around. Number threes and 4s, you get them off eBay anytime. They're dirt cheap. The barred Parkers will cost you a little bit. I don't necessarily recommend them to anybody because they are kind of spindly looking and they feel kind of delicate in your hands. Gripping them is, well, if you have problems gripping things, they're probably not for you. You also notice these are all flat handles, so they're not going to roll off the bench top and land in your foot. The only way they're going to land in your foot is if you happen to drop one and stick out your foot and try to catch it. I know it's a reflex action for a lot of people. Put your foot out there so you don't break that glass. Put your foot out there when it's a scalpel. Odds are good you're going to have a scalpel going right through the top of your shoe, right into your foot. And the voice of experience, which is currently speaking, can tell you, yes, that can happen. It does not feel good. And it's kind of annoying because you can't just take the shoe off to find out what you did because there's a scalpel pinning the shoe to your foot. So, you got to take the scalpel out, take the shoe off, take your sock off to see how badly you're bleeding. And it's not too bad generally. Nothing that adhesive tape won't solve. Okay. These are my 2 favorite, well, 2 of the 6 small cutting surfaces. It's just oak flooring. It's scraps of oak flooring, old red oak flooring. I put down a red oak floor a long time ago, and I kept every scrap that I didn't throw in the fireplace. You can see the one, I paint on top of them. I beat them up. I cut them. I saw them. I drill holes in them. But it's good hard wood, and your blade doesn't slip through it very easily.
Yep.
Bigger cutting surface, piece of oak shelving. Yeah, it's beat up too. This is actually one of the ones I use on my little variable speed drill press. One of the things careful to notice, most of these cuts, they're at diagonals. I'm not cutting with the grain. I'm not cutting across the grain. I'm cutting diagonal across the grain. Keeps the blade from getting stuck in the grain and going off where it wants to go and dragging your blade in the wrong place. And yes, everybody has a utility knife. And if you're cutting 1/16 inch scribe siding or even just plain basswood stock, perfectly usable tool for doing that, for making large cuts. Get a nice sharp blade in it though. Dull blades are your enemy. So, how do I cut something? Well, there's the number 11. I've measured down. Put the window on there. It's roughly 16 by 17 millimeters. Measuring from the back of the casting to how big a hole you have to have. And I've arbitrarily set it, I don't know how far down from the top, and measured down 16 millimeters. I like to use millimeters. It's a smaller unit, and you can get it fairly accurately. And you can see cross grain, one in the groove. That's the easiest cut. Save it for last. And one not in the groove. That's the one that's going to be a little annoying because that's with the grain. And a steel ruler. Don't get an aluminum ruler. Don't use a plastic ruler. Get a good steel ruler. This is just one I stumbled across years ago. It's HO and OO, depending on which way you're looking at it. I don't really care. All I care is it's a steel straight edge. Use a piece of angle iron if you want, but get something that you're not going to cut with your scalpel and you can hold down comfortably. So I'm cutting cross grain first, because if you cut with the grain, you're likely to split it all the way to the very end. So you cut the two cross grain pieces cuts. Just draw the scalpel against the straight edge 2-3 times to get a good groove in it. Once you've established the line with the scalpel blade, you can cut all the way through. You're going to start at one end, draw towards the other. Then you're going to flip the whole board around 180 degrees and get the other corner, because you can't get from corner to corner with a bevel, with that angled blade drawing it through the wood. So you have to flip it around, get into the other corner, repeat. Okay, you can finish it up freehand, and you can actually feel the blade go through it. You'll feel it go through the basswood. It'll grab the oak, and you'll know you're through. And you can flip it over and check it, which is something you should do anyhow. So you know that you've gotten from corner to corner. You flip it back over. Well, I already zipped through this one because it was easy. I'm terribly lazy. But then here, somehow I managed to get my fingers in this picture and use the camera at the same time. That's a remarkable achievement just for me. Technical wizardry is not my forte. But again, your steel ruler right up on the line, pinch it down good, draw the blade through it very carefully. Do not let it wander in the grain. You can see, again, I'm cutting it at a diagonal. I'm trying not to get caught up in that oak, because you don't want to get caught up in the oak. And you've got a hole. Fancy that. And the window actually fits in it. Shocking. I've actually cut a hole the right size the first try. And generally, I actually cut them a little small, a millimeter or two, half a millimeter small, width-wise, or top to bottom. If it's too small, I'm usually widening it consistently across whatever the structure I'm working with. If the hole is not large enough top to bottom, I'm usually opening it at the top, because the bottom is something that's set. You don't want to move it. It's usually, you want a straight line of the bottom of the windows. Okay, moving right along. We've got holes. Where was I? Oh yeah. So I ripped the windows back out of this because I hadn't glazed them. It's very difficult to glaze windows from the outside in. In fact, I think it's pretty close to impossible. So they're back out. I literally pried those back out, and they're off being painted. And after getting glazed, I've added stake sides, this little box that actually lifts out if you want it to come out. I don't care if it comes out or not. I hadn't really decided what I was going to put in this yet. It started off being gravel, and I decided, we'll find out later, gravel is not what ended up going in there. Lots of nut, bolt, and washer castings. Lots of times at the variable speed drill press, just drilling holes. And then tweezers and nut, bolt, and washer castings going in one at a time from both sides. That gets old after about number 300 or number 30, depending on who you are and how much patience you have and how good a pair of tweezers you have. But that's the way I do it. Soldered up a nice step here from scrap brass, and there's a step on the other side too. So there's one large grab iron on this side. There's not on the other. And I've added nut, bolt, and washers to simulate that this is mounted with those. There's the other side. More nut, bolts, and washers, other little styrene, little details like this little plate here and these plates over here. We've got some brass. They're not the same on each side. I ran out of what scrap brass was this that I had, so I had to make do with whatever I had. They look very similar. They're slightly different because of the size of the brass. So it's a shop built maintenance away car. Who says they're going to build the step out of the same stuff on each side? You work with what you got. Okay, so these get glued into place from underneath, and actually there's a piece that runs into the side sill. There's a hole drilled through the brass, and there's actually a pin that gets dipped in CA and put through that hole into the wood. These do not come off easily. Okay, stirrup steps. That's supposed to be goo, not good. So there's a typo. Minus five demerits for me. Okay, and they're all pinned in place as well with the stirrup steps. Same deal, glued in place and then drilled and pinned with dress pins, dipped in CA. Roof walk supports. Those are grant line parts. And we have to put those in now. And the walkway supports on the corners, because we're going to cover the roof over with tar paper, or in this case, Panera napkins with a 50% overlap, held down with 50% water glue mixture. Once that's dry, here's where you take that number 11 scalpel and go around the perimeter and cut off all the overhang. And you use a brand new blade, because anything less than a brand new blade is going to get hung up on that paper with the glue in it. So you need to move carefully with a new blade. Okay, so we paint the roof now, because if we don't paint the roof now, we're not going to be able to put the roof walks in place. And so they're in now. It's just pre-painted, whatever size that is. I think that's probably 2 by 12 or something of that size. I don't always measure the actual size of wood. I look at what fits, and I said, that's right. That's the right size. Whatever that is, it fits the right. It fits the hole, fills the space. Use that piece. But painting them in advance makes things a lot easier. So it's sometimes good to pause, paint some parts, then glue them down. Okay, we've added grab irons on the ends. I've added the brake wheel. There's a ratchet and pawl casting over here, the shaft. It's going down into a brake stirrup. Those are all precision scale parts. Everything's been stained. It's probably a dilute Minwax mixture. I have no idea what's in the jar, because it says mystery mix. As I run low on any particular can of Minwax, I just pour it into that jar. So that jar is always changing. Just slap it on everywhere. This is, I've forgotten what color it is, but it's actually it's a Southern Pacific boxcar brown or something, which is in fact not brown. It's actually almost red. But it's what I have. It's flow quill. And, you know, it's flow quill. You love the smell of flow quill in the morning. It smells like model railroading. So you can see the end details a little bit better. I've got a smoke jack up here now. These roof walk supports, they're easier to pre-paint and then glue into place. Trying to paint these once you put them up here is kind of painful. And a lot more paint on everything. So second or third coat. That flow quill paint, that bottle was unusually thin. And I got to put the windows back in soon and put those stakes with that area that was fenced off back in. So we're going to pause here for some incantations, some chanting. Jim's going to dance widdershins. Watch it, watch that. Anybody who knows what widdershins really is. And if you know what Harrow Spicy is, I don't want to know who you are. That's between you and your own conscience, your own confessors. So, the end point. So I was going to put gravel in there, as I didn't. Odds and ends, little coal box that I put together out of some scrap siding. I'm not sure whose part that is. It might have been a Tishi container. The rest of these are actually cast parts that I cast in molds that I have. They are actually cast in a dental stone material, which I'm told is no longer available. Some miscellaneous odds and ends, a shovel, there's an oil can, hammer, lamp, a couple of figures. This casting arrived serendipitously, whatever, it magically arrived in a pile of other castings that I bought off eBay. And I said, oh, I know where this goes. It goes right on this car. So some paint, some glue, bang. We have a secure lockbox for some reason on the end of this car. Probably holds something we don't really want to know about. Windows are painted, glazed, back in place. You can see from the other side. And there's our figures. He's not happy because I missed the camera angle. The dog has piddled on the deck there. There's a nice yellow stain right where you don't want it on the crate. So there's the other back corner. And I think that just about wraps this car up. And it does. And yeah, supposedly I'll be back sometime doing brake components installation. I don't know when that is. I'll have to go look it up and find out when I'm going to be in trouble. And sometime I'm going to be building a trolley car because Jim and I roped each other's arms into having me build I think it's a Sacramento Northern car, a LaBelle kit. I haven't built a LaBelle passenger car trolley in more than 15 years. So that's going to be an adventure for everybody. And if there's any questions, now's the time to start screaming.
Martin, it's Pat here.
Pat,
Yeah.
I remember you.
Those trucks that you got on that car, are they roller bearing or are they?
One is.
I kind of looked at them and I said, they look a little different.
They are. There's two different trucks on that car.
I thought so. What brand are they? Do you know?
I'm pretty sure one of them is precision scale, and the other one might be an Overland.
Okay.
Actually, the one is, yeah, it's either Chemtron or precision scale, and the other one I'm pretty sure is an Overland truck.
They're nice looking trucks.
Yeah, but they're mismatched, and the odds of I ever
know.
match them again is next to never.
Yeah.
So where's a better place to put a pair of mismatched trucks than under a maintenance away car?
You got it.
You put them to work.
Greg, I have a question.
Yes.
You were cutting out the window. I use scalpels, but usually for more delicate work than that.
Yeah.
I would have used an X-Acto, but for cutting out that window, did you use a number 10 or 11 blade?
That was the number 11. That was the one I
Okay.
pictured there. And you can see some of those blades have green and red tape on.
Yeah.
That's so I know which ones are the oldest ones or the newest ones. And there are times when you want a brand new blade.
Mhm.
There are times when you want one that's not quite so brand new, depending on what you're cutting. You learn with experience that a slightly lesser sharp blade actually is what you want to cut some types of wood with and cross the milled sections. Because you have
And then
something
do you
loose.
use the number 10s more for shaving and stuff? Or?
I haven't shaved in decades. But yes, actually for cross-cutting strip wood.
Ah.
I will use them more for that than anything else.
Okay.
But or shaving opening a little larger, but the number 11 works well for that too. But I'll switch to, if I'm shaving the opening a little larger, I'll actually switch to a newer blade because I want to control very, very fine amount, very controlled. I want to make sure it's very sharp. So I just shave a little bit off, test fit the window in, doesn't fit, take it out, shave a little more off, and actually look on the back side to see where it's binding. So you can see the casting is binding against the wood. You can say, oh, there's the little piece I need to shave off a little bit more. So flipping things
Thank
over,
you.
looking from the other side is useful.
Martin, I really appreciate you taking the time to show us how to cut. I think that's a really useful skill for a modeler, and a lot of us have done it for a lot of years, and I think a refresher course was well worth it. So thank you so much.
No problem.
Now I'd like to turn to Bob Davidson for his workshop tips, tools, etc. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Let me share my screen here. And hopefully everybody can see that.
Yes, sir.
So here we go with this week's workshop tips and tricks. Again, for anyone who's new, I've been working in the theater and exhibit fields for most of my life. So tonight's main topic is material madness. We tend to use some stuff in the exhibit and theater world, a lot of times for its lightness, for its weight. But these are just some things I thought I'd like to share with you all. So first, some sheet goods that we use. Most everyone is probably familiar with foam core. Foam core is nice, but it's a paper surface. It tends to bend pretty, it dents pretty easy, etc. So what we typically use is something called gator foam, which you can also get at art supply stores. It's the same core. It's a polystyrene foam core, but it has a wood veneer surface on it. It's incredibly hard and incredibly rigid. So you can get it in natural with a white surface or a black surface. So if you are looking for just a lightweight board for a base or whatever for a background, gator foam is really the preferred paper type of sheet material to use. We use a product called Sintra, which is expanded PVC sheet. So it's a foam expanded PVC core, and then it has a polished surface on it. Comes in thicknesses from 1 millimeter up to 12. I've seen 20 millimeter thicknesses. What's really neat is you can weld it with PVC cement. You can heat it and curve it. You can form it with heat also. We use our acrylic bending machine, which is nothing more than a piece of nichrome wire on a dimmer. So you can actually heat a line and do bends with it. It does take paint, and it is machinable in the thicker stuff. You can put inserts into it, etc. So that's called Sintra. It comes in a lot of different colors, and there are a lot of different brands. There's Comatex, Trovacel. There's a lot of different types of the same expanded PVC sheet. Another thing we use a lot of for product boards and things like that, I don't frankly know. I keep a couple of sheets of this around just to paint on our scraps that I have at home. It's called the Luca Bond, which is, again, it's a plastic core, but now you have an aluminum surface. Usually comes either brushed or white. Another trade name for this is Dybod. So you want to check those out as well. There's more information at this 3acompositesusa.com. I'll skip to that real quick. And you can see under the graphics and display, there's all these products, and you can go and get all kinds of technical information on all these things. So just interesting to kick around. I do want to say that you want to look and see if you have an exhibit house in your area, or there's a scenic shop, or even if you have a regional theater. We use these materials all the time, and frankly, we throw out a lot of scraps, and a lot of the scraps that we throw out are big enough certainly for use on most model railroads. So if you can, get friendly with the local scene shop or exhibit house, or even if you have a convention center in your area. Unfortunately, a lot of the convention industry, the exhibit industry, is probably one of the biggest waste generators in the country. So at the close of a show, a lot of stuff winds up in dumpsters. Another interesting sheet good is laminate backer. You'll see this a lot in people that are doing laser cutting, but laminate backer itself, it's really cheap. It's like $10 for a 4x8 sheet. Not that you're going to go buy one, but again, it's a scrap that we use. We typically put this on the back of a sheet of MDF or plywood if we need to balance out a panel, because if you put laminate on one side, it's going to warp. So laminate backer is a really nice. I know Nick up at Itla Laser Art. They use laminate backer in some of their parts, so it's a good thing to know. Sign foam is another thing that we use. This is a real high density foam, which is used for outdoor signage. And again, if you have a sign shop in your area, get friendly with the person and see what they're throwing out, because I actually use this stuff. I drilled it out and I use it for holders for all my paint jars. We had a couple of sheets left over from a job. Coroplast sheet. So this is corrugated cardboard in plastic. Comes in different thicknesses and it comes in a lot of different colors. So it might be something that you find a use for, just for masking something off or just as a back structure. It's very lightweight. This stuff, you could sometimes find it at local art shops. They might have that. Homasote. We all know Homasote. You can buy it still at Home Depot and Lowe's. It's called soundproofing board now. But the one thing that we use Homasote for is we split it to make bricks, to make fake brick walls. But if you look at that, they really would lend themselves to being terrain. So by splitting a sheet of Homasote, you get this kind of very rough texture that might be a really good base for an outdoor scene or a rock wall or something like that. So something to think about. The way we do it is we have a couple of these that we made up in the shop. These are just brick splitters, and we cut the Homasote to shape, but you can just use a chisel and a hammer, and they'll split. Once you get it started, it'll split right in half, and it's a pretty good way to use Homasote in an interesting fashion. Some other stuff that we use around: ethafoam rod, which is backer rod. Again, just a foam product that is good for infilling stuff. Cracks, if you have expansion, if you have joints between modules or something like that, you can use it to seal up. It comes everywhere from 1/4 inch up to, I've seen 2-inch, 2.5 inch ethafoam. You can find this at building suppliers. Roofers will use it. Masons will use it. It's used at expansion joints. Sign cutting vinyl. Really good thing to know, because we go through a ton of vinyl for sign making. When we get to the end of a roll, we're pretty much, it's unusable. I give a lot of this to the local high school art department. But again, if you have a sign shop, there are frosted varieties, there are flocked fabric varieties that can be really good, again, as bases for landscapes. So you do want to look at that. We also use release tape. Excuse me. This is kind of like, I can use it kind of like a painter's tape. Comes anywhere from inch wide to 12 inches wide. You can buy this up on Amazon. But what's neat about transfer tape, this is Transfer Right Ultra, you can actually see through it a little bit. So if you want to tape over something to protect the surface, this will not adhere. It's a very light adhesive, but you can see through it, so you can actually cut things to size, etc. It's a good help. So that's kind of the materials. The tool of the week is a contour gauge. If you don't have one, I suggest you get one. They're a lot of fun to use. I use them just to mirror, obviously they're made for doing moldings and things like that, but they're really good if you have to cut around something. If you have a structure on your layout and you need to, right now I'm cutting around, putting in some false groundwork around the roundhouse, and I'm using this to actually give me my angles in it. So it's just a real easy way to transfer. You can get expensive ones, you can get cheap ones. Here I just did a little pattern on my jar of styrene cement. Less than $10. The general tools. I like this one because the leaves that make up the contour gauge are very small. They're very thin. So you can get a lot of, it's more accurate. Some of the other ones out there are now plastic and the fingers are actually thicker. So you want to be careful with that. But this is just the down and dirty one, the General Tools one. It's been around forever. So I recommend it. Tonight's neat website is outwater.com. Outwater Plastics is a supplier of all kinds of neat stuff. If you are ever just to go through it and see, a lot of it is structural stuff, but they have a lot of decor, just a lot of neat, standoffs, extruded profiles. They have all kinds of stuff. You can make your own. You can open an account with them. They don't care. They'll ship it, whatever it is, to you. So it's just a neat source, and that's just outwater.com, which is a pretty cool website to poke around and get some new ideas and stuff like that. Next week, we're going to be looking at getting our act together with fasteners. We'll look at some alternate fasteners, things that I use a lot, and we'll have some fun with that. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And let's go back to the Zoom. One thing I did, just a little bonus thing. I was at the dollar store on Monday. In the aisle where they have health and beauty. Okay, this is glue dry for nails. Guess what? It's AC accelerator. $1.25. I bought like 10 of them. So it's a lot better than $20 a can. It's an aerosol. So it is, I looked it up and checked it out. It is AC accelerator. So check your local dollar store for a deal. That's it for this week. Thank you, Jim.
Anybody have any questions for Bob? Bob, thank you so very much. I also want to tell you how much I appreciate all the hard work that you're putting in as chairman of our scholarship committee. I think you're just doing a fantastic job, and I can't thank you enough for doing it.
Well, thank you, Jim.
So now let's turn to our next guest, and that is Tom Farrell. Tom is going to show us how he built one of his dioramas. Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me again. I'm going to do a share screen here. I hope. How are we doing here? Hold on. There we go. Give me a second here. There we are. Everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Well, I'm not in Bloomington, Indiana at the moment. I'm in Sacramento, California. So I couldn't prepare anything on my layout, but I had these photos from a distillery that I made a couple years ago, and I thought I'd share it with you. But first, I always like to show a picture of my old layout. This is the corner of the town of Old Gothic on the original Rustic Buffin Old Gothic Railroad. As everybody knows, it was, or may know, 15 years in the making and 1 year to take down. And I'm building the new version as we speak. This next building, this is going to be this is Barron's White Lightning Whiskey. It's a scratch build that I did. I'm going to show you how I did it. People should not get intimidated by scratch building. It's just really a series of simple steps that create, models for a fraction of the cost of laser cut kits. I don't do it from a cost realization. I just prefer to scratch build and have original structures. Nothing wrong with laser cut kits. I just think it's kind of neat to do your own thing. And I'll show you how I did this. I always start with a piece of model aircraft grade plywood. And I start with no plans whatsoever. This is the planning stage right here, where I conceptualize, in this case, 3 general areas. I always paint the perimeter black and the rest of it gray. It's just a habit. And I start with the foundation. And on the left is simply a 1/4 inch basswood. And on the right there, top, that looks like balsa wood. I have a sheet of that I'm trying to use up. So areas that don't require a lot of strength, I try to use up that balsa sheet. What I've done here is that area that was balsa wood is now, quote, concrete. I took some plastic sheet, I think 040 thickness, and I cut it and veneered that box that I just showed you, and then I scribed into the plastic to make it look like there were casting lines there. It's just a nice little detail. And the bottom right is monster board rock, random cut stone. So that's just wood. And I put it on a 45-degree angle. Usually I sand the corners and I match the stone so it's not, doesn't end abruptly. It looks like it's part of the, each wall is part of the other wall. And then the other structure I just took, it looks like some more Monster Laser Company's brick, and I laminated that over my 1/4 inch basswood. So the foundations of the 3 structures are now in. One's brick, one's concrete, and one's stone. Oop. And we're jumping around a lot here. So, sorry to jump right into pre-made walls there, but basically I'm taking a siding of some kind from one of the manufacturers. I don't remember which one this is, but that's just a siding. And as we saw in the last demonstration, you can see the lines that I've put in there to cut out the cutouts. Those are scaled to Grant line windows. And I heavily brace my models with that 1/4 inch basswood. I don't want any warpage, and it's really inexpensive to do it. Makes for a very strong model. I think one of the most important things you can do when you scratch build or build a laser kit is to keep everything square. If you keep everything parallel, perpendicular, and square, it simply fits better. There's less fudging. So I make it a point to make sure everything's squared up. Here I've put on a base coat of paint. If you see here to the right wall there is just the base green. And then the highlighted wall is basically scratched with a wire brush. And then I've put a black India ink on there. And then I've dry brushed some white on there. It's a very simple process. So there's a base coat. These are all, I don't use the Flocal paints anymore, any of the hazardous paints. I just use the ceramic or the acrylic paints from a craft store. Infinite number of colors, and they're not typically hazardous to your health. And they're very inexpensive. You know, they're less than $1, typically a bottle. So I like to add a little dimension to my buildings instead of having just flat walls. So I have a bump out there. Just adds a lot of visual interest to the model, as you'll see going forward here. See the dormers, how simple it is to put on dormers. The roof is nothing more than, I think, 1/8 inch aircraft grade plywood. And then the dormers are just another scale wood, in this case, you know, just little triangles that I've cut out, and I don't use super glue anymore, but that's what these were put on with, was super glue. And There's another detail on the other side. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is just how simple a process of scratch building is. It's just a series of simple cut parts that when added, when you continuously add these simple cut parts to a structure, you're going to see a world-class model at the end. You can see it's just slow build. Now I've put the deck on and the porch, if you will. And I've test fit some of the Grant Line windows here. See the colors again. I started with like just a gray on that bump out, and on the dormers just a base color gray. I've scratched it with a wire brush, and then I've washed it with an alcohol wash. Same is true with the porch there. There's a detail shot here. I just paint that green on there. It's just an acrylic craft paint. Scratch the bejesus out of it, and you get that. I mean, there's really nothing to this. You just scratch it. It looks like it's 100 years old. It's nothing to it, really. It's just patience, And that's just strip wood. That's scale strip wood. It looks like I've used 1x8s in that case, and those are 4x4 vertical pieces and a 2x6 up top, or 2x8 up top there, the unpainted one. And again, you just layer these. I put these, I think those are 2x8s there. I just measured across some 16-inch centers and in scale, and super glued them to the roof, just like you're building a house, really. It's just simple pieces that you just keep building and building and building, and it just looks super detailed at the end. And there is the, I did put a sheet of sheathing on there, which is basically pieces of very thin plywood. And then I put these shingles on there, row by row. These are commercial shingles, strip layer by layer. You can see here, I've put some of the perimeter trim on the building. If you look at the corners and across the top. Again, it's just strip wood, pre-painted. Pre-paint the strip wood, glue it on. Now you can see the model's really taking shape. I mean, to me, that looks pretty spectacular. It's just so simple. You see the weathering underneath the windows. It's like a little dry brush. And see how the roof has some detail. It's not just, where the bump out is, has a little shelf there that's different. The smokestack is a precast, I purchased that from somebody and just painted it up. Everything gets trimmed out. If you see the trim along the bottom of the model and along the sides, it covers up your corners if there's any misfits. This is looking underneath the front roof. There's that sheathing I was bragging about. And if you look at the support under there, there's 4x4. Well, it looks like 4x4s underneath there supporting those beams running perpendicular to the front of the house, the front of the structure. Again, there's nothing complicated about this. It just requires patience, Here's the actual still for the distillery. The actual still on the right there, that was a grain structure from some Rick's products, I believe. I just used 2 layers of it and put in expensive plastic that I had around to make the pipe come out of it. And I painted it, made it look rusty. The barrel that it goes into, I think I started with the shaving can lid, and then I just super glued wood around the perimeter of the cap of a shaving can and put a front on it. And then the decking to the left is, again, they're just simple pieces of wood. It may look complicated, but it's really just a question of patience. For visual interest, I usually leave some of the windows open, those grant line windows open. There's a side, see my water tower, that's all scratch built. I have to put the wires around that water tower. So in other words, those, we have a close-up coming up of that. Yeah, right there. It's not quite finished. You have to put bands of like a steel rod around there. That's a simple thing. I've got to finish that up. But it's sitting on a just a little simple structure I made out of scale wood. Whole trick here is to just continuously add details and visual interest to the model. I thought a water tower up there would look pretty neat. And if you see my ladder there, that just a commercial ladder from Plastruct, but then I put these wooden steps up the roof, if you will. That's nothing more than scale 2x4s, I think. I just pre-stained them and then I super glued them onto the roof. So the theory is you can walk up the steps, go up the ladder, go up the roof, and you have access to the water tower, was the theory. Yeah. There's looking down at the roof, all the roof lines. See, there's 4 or 3 dormers and then the water tower, and then metal roof on the basically the boiler room. So close up of some of the details, just add some ready-made barrels and garbage cans and a couple pallets, and I do a lot of the pre-detailing on the bench here, and then I drop this whole thing into the layout. You can't tell that it was built on a piece of plywood when I'm all done. I had these figures are from Artista. They do a great job. They're pewter metal. They're pre-painted. I don't paint them normally. That's the overall model, basically. All scratch built. The fences are easy. I've talked about them in the past. They just make a model jump, you know. So there we are. Any
Tom, on your models that you build, how important do you think roof detail is?
well, that's an interesting question. When you're visiting a layout, I mean, typically the first thing you see is you're looking down, because you're typically, even like my layout is between 48 and 52 inches high, let's say. And your eyesight, you're looking, the first thing you see typically is the roofs. So I think it's important to break up the roofs, weather the roofs, put details on the roof. It's all about visual interest and training the eye to, you know, if you see the roof and you see, you know, like for example, on my the water tower, for example, or those unusual 2x4s that run up the shingles, you know, that's an unusual detail that catches somebody's eye. So it adds visual interest to the whole view. Yeah.
I've had people tell me in the past that the impression that you get when you look at a roof, your mind will carry that through the model.
Yeah, I tend to agree, because if you just use a flat shingled roof, yeah, it's somewhat uninspiring and relatively repetitive, so it's not so interesting. But if you throw things on, like, you know, maybe you show a weathered roof and you show some of the sheathing or tar paper going through it, or you put on 2x4s, like, then now your mind says, oh, somebody could walk up that roof. So now you're getting somebody interested in what you're doing here. You know, it's not just a flat plane. And that's why I don't do buildings that are typically flat walls. I call them bump outs. You know, I put visual interest, some dormers or something. So I'm not just flat square buildings, you know.
Yeah. Beautiful structure. Thank you so very much.
All right, thank you.
Well, now I want to turn to Phil Edholm for his segment on local clubs and NMRA divisions. And he has a really special local group for us this evening. Phil, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. I'd like to introduce some of the folks, and I've got to go find everyone here. So why don't you unmute if you're here's first is Greg Warth. And so I'm gonna actually let Greg come in and introduce everyone else as I bring them in. So Greg, why don't you tell us first just a little bit about yourselves and your kind of club and what you're doing, and we can then bring everybody else in and we can have a conversation.
Sure. Yeah, we can, we kind of wear two hats. One of them is that we're the Tidewater Division of the MER, Mid-Atlantic or Mid-Eastern region. And so we have an active division. It's going pretty well. We have good meetings where we get educational videos and I think, you know, a fairly large number of people attend. We'd like to get more. It's a fairly large area, so some of the guys, you know, are way out in Elizabeth City, and they don't always make the meetings that are in Virginia Beach. But anyway, that's one hat, and our other hat that we wear, our little group here is that we're trying to get a model railroad museum started. Somewhere in the Hampton Roads area. And, you know, we've been dealing with this or planning for this for about 2.5 years. We're into our third year. We're really trying to, we've been trying to find a place, a location for it. We've got all the planning done, the business plan and bylaws and all that stuff. We actually have our 501c3 so it's a nonprofit organization. We've been researching other model railroad museums across the country. We kind of look to the San Diego Model Railroad Museum as kind of a place that we'd like to emulate. So that's pretty much what we're up to. We don't have a location solidified yet, although we went out to Fort Monroe today, and there are a couple buildings out there that look pretty good. So we might consider one of those. But
so is this a building you're looking at acquiring then, or?
Yeah, well, it'll be a lease most likely, and so we've got to crunch some numbers and figure out whether there are enough people and visitors in the area that would make this museum viable. So that's what we're going to do now after looking at the buildings and seeing what's out there. But it's a beautiful area. Fort Monroe, I don't know if you've ever been down this way, but it's a nice tourist area. And, you know, I think we might fit in pretty well there. Fred, feel free to pipe in.
So Greg, your role is you're kind of the leader of the band, so to speak?
Not really. Actually, Fred is the president, but and I'm the secretary. I'm kind of a contact person, but
that's good.
And then Gary Leaphart is a newer member of our group, but he brings a lot of talent with him, and he's more of our director of education, and that's something I wanted to emphasize is that we want this museum to be very educational. We want to use the STEM concept of teaching, you know, science and technology, engineering, and mathematics. Mix the word STEM, and so you know, and we want to invite local students in to build their own layouts, maybe a couple of them in our facility. We'll have about eight or nine different layouts, and they'll be all scales. GOH, all of them, HO, and even down to Z. So we think it'll be a really nice museum. It's going to be hopefully in a nice area. And I think it'll be a good thing for the community, the families. It's a good family thing to go to and visit. And so I'm very hopeful that we'll get it off the ground. I've over the past couple of years, I've heard a lot of naysayers saying, "Oh, you'll never do that." But I don't know. I think we're getting close to it. So I'm very positive about it.
So have you had any success trying to find, a city or, the thing about San Diego that's so interesting is that, they're in a location that the city had structures and was willing to dedicate those to different, call it for lack of a better word, artsy kind of things, because there are other things in that area, other museums and things in addition to, both the HO and the larger gauge layouts that are there.
Right.
Did you have any success trying to find, a civic entity to partner with, or because
we were very hopeful about that at first, and we did everything we could to try to get one of the cities to sponsor us or to give us a vacant building that or one that we could rent very inexpensively, but it just didn't pan out. We met with two of the mayors in the local cities, and the mayors seemed interested, and they wished us a lot of success, but they didn't have a building that they could give us. So we're pretty much down to trying to find a commercial place because there doesn't seem to be anything else. One of us is still working on the possibility of getting a city building, but I'm sort of losing hope in that. So that's why we hired a commercial broker, and he's been helping us go around and try to find a place. And maybe we found one today. I don't know. We'll have to see how the numbers work out.
Well, if you want office space, there's a lot available in San Francisco, I know. So.
Oh yeah, I know. It's kind of a long drive out there.
It's a long drive though. So. So Fred and Greg, tell a little bit about yourselves. Well,
I was the previous superintendent for the Tidewater Division at the Middle Eastern region, and I was the president during the pandemic stage. So there was a big lockdown, and consequently, the layout that we had in a shopping mall that we were in there rent-free for 10 years. And the gentleman ended up not being the owner, and the new owners came in, and we left. So that kind of motivated us to get started to find a new location. And as we started looking, that's why we started looking at what would be a driver for us that would be something that we could sell to the community, sell to the cities, to help sponsor whatever we're doing. And that's why we went and did the research and found 18 museums across the United States. San Diego was our emphasis because one of our members that's on the board used to be a member of the San Diego Museum. So we were lucky enough to get documentation from them. And then as we did this research, we found Colorado, we found Greenville, South Carolina, which is the miniature world of model railroading. And they have a great website. We got a lot of knowledge from that. They even have planning and estimates posted on their website, and that was a great help. So once we saw all of that and we did the analysis of what all the museums are doing across the United States, we said the only way that we can become unique is nobody's doing all scales, all basic scales. We don't branch off to do narrow gauge, but we just stay with the basics. So that would give us Z to G. And then if we add the one or two layouts that the high school students or the middle grade students would build on their own, using stem from the ground up, that would give us around 10 to 11 layouts. And then if we get a wooden one for the little tots to play with, which is what we had at our last layout, it would go over pretty good. We had 26,000 viewers over 10 years looking at one layout, which was HO scale. And we had 4,000 square feet. And what we looked at today were two buildings that were just under 7,000 square feet. And we were impressed with what they were kind of offering, but we still got to run the numbers. So we're still
how many members do you have going into this? Because 7,000 square foot facility to put layouts in is a pretty big facility, even if a high schooler is building a small one. And
well,
so a lot of layout to be built.
We started 2 years ago of making interest to the other local clubs. And because several of the clubs are not getting young members, and the members that are there are starting to dwindle. Yeah. We were trying to get them interested in joining and having their clubs because they were losing their spaces too, as a result of one reason or another. So if we could persuade them to come and be part of our museum, still have their own club, their own rules, they would still do their own thing. It's just that they would help us manage as volunteers to do the museum and have their layout so they could display it and still run op stations if they wanted to. The other thing is that we would want to offer free tours or free admission on Wednesdays to school systems, regardless of where they come from across the United States. It would be free for them and their chaperones. Yeah. And that was received very well by Virginia Beach mayor and the Chesapeake mayor. So we still haven't given up on Virginia Beach because they have a vibe area that we're trying to see if we can't find something in the middle of the tourist area of the waterfront there, the ocean front. We're still looking within the two other cities, Chesapeake and Norfolk, because they have both major malls that have gone bankrupt. One of them's going to get completely torn down. We're trying to see if we can't push our way into one of the entertainment slots. We're looking at one of them in Norfolk to see if as a nonprofit, can we get in there because they just made a deal with another nonprofit. So we're trying to see if we can't wiggle our way in maybe into that one also. So we got a lot of irons in the fire. We just need visibility to just let people know that we are alive and well and that we have a mission that we're trying to accomplish.
So this is a vague thought, and someone else on the new tracks in the community may know better. Clark Kooning, I think, went to a museum up in Ontario that's operated kind of as a community. You know, in other words, it's a large building with multiple layouts in it that are operated by different groups. I don't know if you've talked to them, but it might be interesting to talk to them because they're actually running that kind of thing. Now, I think the structure may have been built by someone who had some money, but it was kind of done around the idea of you have a big structure and you get 4 or 5 different groups to come in and build different layouts, which so it might be worth talking to them and seeing, because that's a fairly interesting idea if you can find a large enough space for a reasonable cost. Have you had any success? You know, I think the challenge is we all think about our clubs as being kind of recreational and for the members, which is kind of the way most of them got structured. The minute you go to being a 501c3 and that, you now can do fundraising. Have you done anything in terms of trying to define local fundraising, et cetera, either for the facility or for the layouts, getting them built?
Well, we were doing multi-phase effort on this museum. The first phase was just to get ourselves recognized by the proper authorities so that we could get the 501 and get the proper licenses for donations, admissions, and we did that. This year, our goal is 1, to find a location, 2, start our donation drive for construction fund so that we can start buying necessary materials. Because one of the things that we want to do is that if we can't get a club to come in and run their gauge, then we will build it. So we need money to buy that material so that we can have another layout. And I'll just use O gauge, for instance. Right now, we do have a commitment from a gauge group, and we have a commitment from an HO group, and we have a commitment from an N gauge group. So you can see that we have interest at this point. It's just that we've already started receiving material donations for Z, N, and H at this point. So we're starting to get some traction now that we're into year 3.
We started applying for grants as well. And we applied for one from CSX and plan to apply for some others from some of the other Class 1 railroads and maybe some Class 2 railroads, maybe some from some of the manufacturers, like Atlas or Aethern or one of those.
Yeah, one of the things, so I'm part of a club here in the Bay Area that's in a fairgrounds, and we have the kind of benefit of a traffic model that's profoundly different than most model railroads. In 19, we actually had about 65,000 visitors. So that kind of contrasts to Greeley was about 20,000, and I think San Diego is about 200 or something like that. So give you an idea of, and so you end up getting a lot of visitors. And we've gone through, because the fairgrounds out here are all going through the same process of getting all of the non-paying customers or non-paying entities off of the facility and becoming more event centers and corporate folks, et cetera. And there's only, and actually it makes sense because they're not getting the financial support from the counties, et cetera. So, but the net result is we had to start about 4 years ago looking at the potential of losing the facility, and either potentially getting a piece of land on the fairgrounds to have to build a new building, because the building is actually a 50, 60-year-old stables that was abandoned as a stables 40 years ago and turned into a model railroad. I think they actually swept the floor when they took the horses out, but that was about it. No insulation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so it would actually not necessarily be undesirable to get a new building, but the problem is when you start looking at building a building, you're talking $400,000 to $500,000 real quickly with ADA compliance and all the other things you've got to build in. One of the things we realized was that there was no way you could do that on membership dues. We actually do great fundraising now, because we get donations during the fair with those people, but even that is not really significant to the cost structure of building a new building, or even building a new layout and replacing what was built over 40 years by literally hundreds of contributors. And so the conclusion we came to is the only way to do it, you've got to get corporate sponsors. And the best way we could figure it, we didn't do this, this was a thought process, was to go out and basically sell square foots. So the idea is, if you do a $20,000 sponsorship, you get your name on the wall, but we'll also custom build a square foot model of one of your buildings on the layout illuminated, so you get the double advertisement. I think it's a real challenge to figure out how do you go to corporate sponsors, because raising $300,000 or $400,000 is, and that's the cost point. A lot of these things you're looking at, it's hard to do $5 at a time. You've got to get some big donors.
Right.
I think one of the ways that we're going to achieve that is that, what was it, about 9 weeks ago, we went to the Chamber of Commerce in Hampton Roads. And they were very appreciative, very supportive, and they kind of went along the same theme that you just discussed, that the way that you get backing and volunteers from the Chamber of Commerce is you got to have a location. And once you get the location, you're going to be able to rub elbows at a dinner, and it'll be amazing what you can get done, but you got to have a location in order to.
You've got to have a plan and a location and what it's going to be in a proposal form. Unless you have details, it tends not to work. But
So we're hopeful that once we identify a location, then once we seal that deal, it's like the movie. They will come once they see the ball field.
Yep. I know years ago there was a company that used to sell a map of Silicon Valley, and they would go around to all the companies in Silicon Valley and they'd charge them a couple of grand or something, $5,000 to get your building on the map. And the more you paid, the bigger the bill. It's kind of that idea of, you're on the map. You do something for the city. Maybe one of the layouts, you do an area that's kind of a representative model, and you put in some of the local businesses. It seems to me that that's, you know, when you take a big effort like you guys are doing, you got to figure out how to get that financial assistance from outside of the railroad community. It's just, we just can't afford it anymore. So
But one of the things that we are doing, that's in the plan, that's in the works, is a model railroad club called the Cape Henry Model Railroad Club. And what it will do is one of the layouts will depict the railroad system from Norfolk into Virginia Beach that went down to the Chamberlain Hotel in the 20s and 30s or 40s, because that was the major go-to place on the ocean front in those days. And that portion will be part of our local history that we're going to put into one of the layouts. And then, and we don't know which scale it'll be on, but we've already started working on the bylaws for that club to get instated so that they can be part of the effort.
You know, the other thing would be on the O side, look for an ON30 group. I know you didn't talk about narrow gauge, but you know, you might find an ON30 modular group that would find the potential of a permanent home location to be desirable, versus traipsing to shows. And you know, there are a number of those. I know the Eastern Loggers, for example, you know, they just found a home for their modular layout. I know the YSL out here, and there are some of these kind of semi-modular or what we'll call sectional layouts, like the Eastern Loggers, the YSL, which was the Yosemite short line built back for one of the narrow gauge. Those were not modular, but they were built sectional to be assembled in a specific configuration. And there are a few of those layouts around that might be interesting to see about trying to arrange one. Like I said, the Eastern Modelers, the Eastern Loggers, I think they put their layout in a museum up, a logging museum. But it might be worth, because you might be able to find someone who has a layout already built where, you know, they can take it in, set it up, maybe help with maintenance, but over time, just turn it over to somebody more local. I know like I said, the YSL, I know the YSL guys here, and the YSL is a, you know, fairly well reputed, built by a number of, you know, well-known modelers, and they're very much trying to find a place for a home for it, because setting it up and tearing it down just over time, it's very hard on it. It wasn't built for that. So you might find one like that if you looked around. Once you got a location, it becomes a lot easier. Location is everything.
Well, it just so happens that we have two gauges that are sort of in that situation. We have an O gauge club that has a layout above the store, a train store. They're up on the second floor. And then there's another group that's S gauge. And both of them are looking for some place to put their traveling show. And I looked at a building that had 9 stalls, which happened to be an old Kmart. But unfortunately, I don't have the dollars to support the square footage that would allow us to go that extra mile to put traveling shows in these stalls so that those clubs would be able to work on them, have space to repair them, at the same time that they have a layout in the museum and they'd be able to go out and go their wares wherever they want to.
Right.
But that's pie in the sky.
Well, cool. Well, guys, I really appreciate it. I think it's very interesting, you know, because you're in the process of doing something that a lot of people think about. And I mean, your comment was an interesting comment at the very beginning. You know, in terms of a Don Quixote journey, there have been 18 successes, 350 million people. You know, so clearly creating a model railroad museum is not something that's for the faint of heart. So wish you all the best, and thanks for coming and talking to us, and look forward. And when you get closer, obviously ask for our help. So back to you, Jim. Any questions?
Yeah, I do, because I used to be a member of this division. That goes back 20 some odd years ago.
Then why haven't I seen you?
And I'm a life member of the MER. They don't offer that anymore, but they did when I joined, at least. So I have some strong feelings, positive feelings about the division. When I was a member of your division, there was a city, and it's been 20 some odd years, I forget the name. There was a city that the division took on, and a bunch of people from the division in effect, built a layout in, I think it was the old train depot in this city.
It
Suffolk.
was in Suffolk, Virginia.
That's
The
it.
CSX depot.
That's it. And the city fathers were behind it. I mean, it was really a solid project. Now, I don't know whatever happened to that, whether it still exists or not. But at least when I was part of the division funded it and really supported that project 100%, and something really all the members were proud of.
Yeah,
We supported.
Still maintains it.
We supported today. As a matter of fact, so far this year and the tail end of last year, we've cleaned up, repaired, and did maintenance on all of their engines for them. We checked the wiring of the layout last year, and we're looking at a schoolhouse, which is 2 blocks from that depot, that has been vacated, and it has lots of room in it. So far, only a couple of tenants have moved in, so we're trying to see if there's a possibility we might be able to get into that schoolhouse, which would be just down the road, because they're already interested in tourism, because tourism supports that depot.
Exactly. And like I say, back then, at least the city fathers, all of them were behind it. They supported us. I mean, we couldn't have asked for any better support, as I remember it, from any governmental organization.
Just to give you an idea of how we're still involved, at this particular time, the division has stepped up and is building a diorama for the Lee Hall train station and museum. They're also restoring a passenger car that was used during the war for wounded soldiers. They're restoring that. And we're going to have a diorama up on the second floor of where the clerk was. And it's like about a 42-inch square diorama from the 1920s. Matter of fact, this house is going to go in that diorama as soon as I finish it. This is the one that I'm working on right now. We also helped the Virginia Beach City with 2 dioramas to support the police department and the fire department, because we took a busy intersection. If you're from this area, you'll know that the street of Virginia Beach Boulevard and Independence is a very congested area. And the police wanted that if there was ever a train accident, how would they handle the situation? So we built them this diorama of that particular area, and they used it for many years, and the fire department used it also. So we are very community oriented in supporting it with the model railroading.
And because of the division's history in doing that kind of thing, it ought to stand you in good stead for showing people that you can produce a major project, because that Suffolk station, as I remember it, that was a significant contribution that the division made, not only in money. The money was a small part of it. It was the people time that from the division members that made that layout possible. And you know, that has to be remembered by the politicians. I mean, that's something that you ought to be very, very proud of, in my opinion.
We also supported the Children's Museum in Portsmouth, Virginia, when they built that, and was trying to get the O-gauge trains that they got that was a collection from Mike the Trainland store that was out in Suffolk. When he passed away, his family donated all that stuff to the Children's Museum, and the division went over and helped build that.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with your project. Possibly your members can support us with our scholarship program. We sure hope so.
That was very interesting. I was very enlightening when I heard that. So that's
well,
a nice step.
Yeah, besides Walters is the first model railroad company that came out with a scholarship program last year. And one of the members here, Greg Cassidy, belongs to a local club that because of Walters, and I think partially because of our endorsement of Walters and encouraging other organizations to consider it, this club started a scholarship program within their local area. Ours is the only one that involves a STEAM program. And the reason that we included art in it is we believe that the STEAM portions of the college education is important, but for our purposes and because we're model railroaders, we believe that art is also critical skill, particularly for model railroaders that they acquire. And therefore, we support the STEAM program, which includes the art part of it, particularly because the art part in most colleges includes 3D printing and that kind of thing, and CAD programs and all of that kind of new technology that in our opinion is the future of model railroading to a large extent. So we would encourage you to consider the STEAM part of it rather than just the STEM. But if anything that you could do to help us promote our scholarship, then we certainly will reciprocate and try to do whatever we can to accommodate you and help you support your project. I don't know exactly how we could work together doing that, but I'm sure open to a discussion of it if you all would like to talk further privately about it.
Yeah,
we welcome that opportunity.
I think one of the things that we don't do well, and I've spent a bit of time and have been involved with the NMRA Museum in Sacramento, and we don't do well talking about how model railroading is a great hobby for life.
Absolutely.
When you're younger, you learn skills that can help you not just in model railroading, but generally in life, whether it's, to do other things or in career. A lot of things that people learn in model railroading ends up being career value for them, depending on their career. And then later in life, it's a really important part of maintaining, a social group and keeping busy and keeping engaged and keeping thinking and all the things that Todd are important. So, it might be worth thinking about, as part of a model railroading museum, talking about, the hobby in that way. We tend to think about the hobby kind of in our view, but not in terms of how do you, to tell people this is something you should think about. Even though you haven't thought about it, it's not just playing with trains. It really is. It's engineering. Something where you show the aspects of it. Most people don't understand. You look at what Tom's building and go through the variety of what I'll call STEAM skills, right? So if you look at STEAM, science, technology, science, you got to understand paint formulas. You got to understand technology. How does STEAM apply in model railroad? How does participating in model railroad prepare you for careers that are STEAM focused? So I think that could be a really interesting thought process to expand expand beyond the model railroading view, but to kind of the hobby as a valuable asset in a community.
That's right.
Anyway, enough said.
We're looking at the school system to see if as we're trying to generate interest with the younger generations to help fill the voids as the older generations move on, that the schools may end up at some point agreeing with us under the STEM or STEAM, so that maybe we can get some kind of agreement or coordination of credits somehow if they build these layouts, and the schools will recognize their achievements.
Oh, absolutely.
That's something to work on.
I think that's a fantastic idea. And that sounds fantastic to me. I will say this to you. You talk about getting corporate support. The reason that I agreed to be the ambassador for the Association of Professional Model Makers is that the association and I both believe that the education and the abilities that model railroaders have, young model railroaders, gives them the skill and the talent if they want to continue as a professional model maker. Therefore, you're opening the doors then to professional model makers in most major corporations, because they either have in-house staff or they subcontract it out to other model making organizations. And what this allows you to do then is to bring that group of people and those corporations into the feeling that they need to support this because this could be their future employee base. And that organization, the major thing that they told me when I first found them and we started talking, and I agreed to be the ambassador for them to model railroading, was their members had trouble today finding employees, qualified employees at the entry level. Mm-hmm. Well, that to me is model railroaders. And model railroaders are all over the country. They're all over Canadian provinces. They're all over the world. And that to me was the entree. And that's why we had our banner and promoted our scholarship at their annual convention that they just had in Dayton, Ohio. Because exposing ourselves and our programs and our desires to help young model railroaders, we want that corporate support. We want that money. We want that corporate support and enthusiasm for what we're trying to do. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in that, I'll be glad to make some introductions for you. Because I do think that could be a way in to a lot of corporations that possibly you're not even thinking about.
Absolutely.
We're going to take you up on that.
That's fine. My email, Fred, whoever would like to follow this up, my email is jimkellow, JIMKELLOW, at New Tracks Modeling, MODELING.com. And if you'll just send me an email, then maybe we can change telephone numbers and then talk. I do better on the telephone than I do email. Phil will tell you that I'm probably one of the few people that when you get my emails, you have to run it through spell check to understand what I'm saying.
Well, we thank you for the opportunity to speak to everybody and listen to our quest of the future and how we want to bring the young folks into this modeling effort. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Phil did a great job in the interview, and thank you so much, and look forward to talking with you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Bye.
Well, folks, that seems to be about our show this evening. I think you've heard from some world-class modelers that have given you some tips and techniques that may help your modeling. We certainly hope so. And now we'd like to turn to our caboose. Phil, thank you so much for finding that one for you. And Phil, I don't want to take your glory here, but Phil had a great idea, or Pat had a great idea. If anybody would like to have their model railroad be our caboose, if you could send us a fairly short video of a portion of your model railroad, then we can show that as a caboose in the future. And Phil can put on the chat function where to send those videos, because I can't tell you where to send them. Phil can. And Phil, if you could put that on the chat function, then if you're interested in having your railroad on the show as one of our caboose segments, We just need a short video, and we'll be glad to schedule it in. And we hope that you'll do that because it'll make you more of a part of our show, and that's what we're trying to encourage. So that's it for this evening. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I think you heard from some great modelers and a great club in Virginia. And most importantly, I hope you learned something. So happy modeling until next time. We'll see you next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that was a great show, Phil. Pat, thank you so very much for all the great work.
You're welcome.